We're back in session, and I'll return to the Student Learning and Achievement Committee and Ms. Camnett.
Thank you, Chair Davis. We'll continue on with SLA 4, and I'd like to thank Mr. Martinez and Ms. Olson for being able to come back to us now with after the break. So, Ms. Thomas, you want to go ahead?
Absolutely. I'm going to turn it over to Matthew Martinez, who is our consultant for significant disabilities, to lead us through the proposed request for the extended content standards.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, and thank you, everyone, for having me today. Good afternoon. I hope your lunch was delightful, and I hope everyone is healthy. So we can move forward to
I think next slide can go.
And I'm going to repeat some of the background knowledge that Ms. Thomas had spoken about earlier. So some background about students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So the Every Student Succeeds Act, a federal law known to many as ESSA, mandates certain provisions for this student population. ESSA provides states flexibility in the standards based on the significant cognitive disabilities presented in a small percentage of our student population. These bullets discuss a quick synopsis of ESSA. The first bullet describes alternate academic achievement standards. States may offer alternate academic achievement standards for students with significant cognitive disabilities, which in North Carolina does in the form of our extended content standards. These standards are closely aligned with the standard course of study. The IEP team provides the ultimate decision on having students instructed towards the extended content standards and assessed through an alternate assessment. So in North Carolina, this alternate assessment is known as the NC Extend 1. So going back to legislation, the verbiage found within North Carolina House Bill 924 indicates all students are required to take the economic and personal finance course in high school. Therefore, based on ESSA, alternate academic achievement standards can be created for the economic and personal finance course for students with significant cognitive disabilities. So the next two slides detail the timeline and process for the creation. My apologies, my phone went off from on my computer. The next two slides detail the timeline and process for the creation of the proposed extended standards for the economic and personal finance course. NCDPI EC Division convened two stakeholder groups to complete this process, a writing group and a review group. A memo was sent to the field for applicants, and through a process, two groups were selected. The writing group convened on August 5th, 2020, consisting of 5 professionals, including 3 EC teachers, an EC coordinator, and an associate professor from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, from the Center of Literacy and Disability Studies. The writing group created the first draft of the extended standards for the EPF course by analyzing the current standard course of study standards and utilizing other states that had similar standards. The next step was for the review group. The review group convened twice. The 7 professionals included 5 program specialists, an associate professor from UNC Wilmington who teaches in a specialized program for students becoming teachers of the significant population, and a separate school building principal. In addition, the proposed standards were also sent out to other states for input. The writing group reconvened and revised the standards based on the feedback. Once the proposed extended standards were finalized, they were sent out for public comment and stakeholder feedback. So this slide just illustrates the timeline that we had just spoken about. There are numerous benefits and outcomes for students with significant cognitive disabilities taking the extended standards for the economic and personal finance course. Benefits include possessing a fundamental knowledge and understanding of the basic principles of economics and money management, apply the knowledge to real-life examples, participate in their own financial literacy, and to demonstrate knowledge necessary to live in and contribute to a financially sound society to their fullest extent possible. So up next to speak about the process is Caroline Olson, an ECS teacher in Wake County and a Keenan Fellow.
Good afternoon. My name is Caroline Olson, and I am a high school extended content standards teacher in Wake County for students with significant cognitive disabilities. Thank you so much for having me first. I'm really excited to be here. I teach my students every day based on the existing extended content standards. So I've really enjoyed being a part of the writing stakeholder group to better understand how these standards are created. As Mr. Martinez just mentioned, the writing stakeholder group consisted of individuals with varying job titles, but I'm losing my voice after only 2 days of teaching online this week. So everyone in the group has varying job titles, but all of us have experience with educating students with significant cognitive disabilities. So we met together, we analyzed and aligned our extended standards with the 5 tenets or strands of the standard course of study and really stayed true to the nature and the purpose of the course. The alignment is clear in that you can see the direct links between the 2 sets of standards. We are really enthusiastic about these extended content standards as we believe that they both reflect the need for some adjustments and modifications to meet the needs of students with significant cognitive disabilities. But more important than that, these extended standards are still considered rigorous and challenging, and it allows us to continue to respect and to hold our exceptional learners to high expectations, which should always be the goal of all educators. So we're really excited about that. When preparing students for significant cognitive disabilities for post-secondary life or life after high school, as educators, we really focus on 3 main areas of transition, which are education, employment, and independent living. In order to reach the students' goals in these areas, as a special educator, we provide both classroom-based instruction as well as community-based instruction during our school day. The new economic and personal finance course and extended standards allow educators and students a plethora of opportunities for real-world instruction and application that are engaging and meaningful for all learners. So our students see the real-world application of everything that they're learning within the classroom, and we have the opportunity during a typical school year to go out into the community and practice what we've learned within the classroom, which is always great in terms of retention of information and application in the future. So coupling these new standards with already existing standards, such as our financial management math standards, this will further prepare our students to not only navigate life after high school and survive life after high school, but also to act as participatory citizens who contribute to a financially sound society. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the future implementation of these standards, and just thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Caroline. I would like to express my special thanks to Ryan, to Sarah, and to Caroline. So our division can work diligently with policy and with standards to make sure that we're providing and supporting instructional requirements. But it really takes people in the field, such as these 3 that have spoken to us today, to really make the magic happen and put all this work into practice. Just an additional piece of information is that we currently have these standards out for public comment. Those comments will be collected and provided back with materials for the February state board meeting to review any feedback that we've received, and certainly to consider any feedback. And also, these courses will be in the presentation that comes in February as well for the new graduation requirements because of the OCS piece next month that Sneha Shah Coltrane will be bringing before the board. So with our presentation being finished, we're going to welcome questions now or any comments that board members would like to make.
Questions from board members? Thank you so much, Ms. Thomas and consultants, for such a great presentation. We understand much more about the work that you do in your department now, and it gives us a better appreciation of the two pieces of the two changes that you're bringing before us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the time today.
To conclude the SLA agenda today, just very briefly, we do have two consent items, SLA 5 and 6, both of which are approval recommendations for high school accreditation. One is the North Surrey High School and the other is McDowell High School. And again, we saw these last month at our December meeting. So those will be coming forward as consent items. And with that, Chair Davis, I think we have concluded the SLA meeting for today.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. I now recognize Mr. Reginald Keenan, Chair of the Healthy Responsible Students Committee. Mr. Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Reginald Keenan, along with my good partner, Alan Duncan, as co-chair on this committee. Today, we have Dr. Ellen Essex. She'll be talking with us concerning the Healthy Active Children policy and an amendment. And with that, I'll ask Ms. Essex to Dr. Essex to take it over.
Thank you, Mr. King. Good afternoon, Chairman Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, Lieutenant Governor Robinson, board members. Thanks for having us this afternoon. Wanted to give you some updates to the Healthy Active Children policy. If you'll remember, last month we brought to you the Healthy Active Children policy report, and in that we gave you updates on how our LEAs are doing related to physical activity, nutrition, and healthful living. Also, important to remember about those is that all of our, in the next slide, you'll see that all of our school health advisory councils are required to have representation from all areas of the whole school, whole community, whole child framework as part of their work. So what we are proposing then today is to look at the current policy and make some amendments to that to address some of the data collection that we'll need to do in order to make sure that our LEAs are using data to drive their work and really address the health needs of our students. The current policy has 7 sections, and you have that policy with you as well. I'm just giving an overview in some of these slides, but these are the 7 sections that are currently in the policy. The next slide shows what we were proposing to add. And we are proposing that we add a section 8 that would include data collection, specifically collection of the youth risk behavior survey data using the CDC survey. And just a reminder of what the YRBS is. I know we've talked about this before. The YRBS measures priority health risk behaviors in our students and their outcomes. And this is one opportunity. You can see those listed there on the left. This is an opportunity for us to really hear from our students on what kinds of health behaviors they're participating in and how that's affecting their health. And we've used quite a bit of this data as we have been discussing some of the physical and mental health needs of our students. When we think about the administration for this year, just to give you a brief overview of the administration of the survey this year, the 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey administration in North Carolina will take place in August. We are moving it to the fall to align with the national survey due to COVID, because the survey has to be accomplished in school. So wanted to move it to make sure that we'll be able to do that in the fall. Again, we'll be doing a statewide sample. So our LEAs, just like they've always been doing, will have state level data. We noted that 63% of LEAs said that they used the state level data in their school health advisory council planning last year. So we're excited that we're going to be able to expand on that a bit for them. 20 of the LEAs that currently receive district level data will continue to do that. And then in this 2021, we will be oversampling all of the 8 State Board of Education regions. And this will give us some more rich data that we can provide to our LEAs. And then we'll have a phased in oversampling at the LEA level in subsequent administrations when the CDC is able to help support us a little more with that. And for us, what's most exciting is this year, for the first time, this will be an online administration, which will cut down in the amount of time that our LEAs will need to take to administer the survey. And this just shows your regions again to give you an idea of those 8 areas will all be oversampled and have data for each of those. So obviously you have this, and this is just an overview. What we're proposing is that we add an introduction to the Healthy Active Children Policy, SHLT 000, that gives an overview of the need for collecting data and how important it is to have those data points in order to target what types of interventions we want to address with our students. In addition to the introduction to the policy itself, we're proposing that we add a section 8 that discusses data collection, and we've included an introduction to that explains what the CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey is and the importance of using that survey and using good, rich data like that to support the work of our shacks. And then from that, in that section, we propose 4 points. One is that each LEA should cooperate with the Department of Public Instruction to collect Youth Risk Behavior Survey data, odd number of years. That the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data collection will be reported to DPI as part of the school-based mental health policy reporting process. And we're working on that so that our LEAs can report back to us how they're using that data also as part of their school-based mental health work. And then also as part of that policy proposal, we're saying to them to you all, that we will provide that data to each LEA for the region then to which they belong. So each LEA will get a set of data for their region that they can use then to create goals and form action plans and really just drive their work to make it more data informed. So that's it in a nutshell. Those are the recommendations that we're making to make changes to the policy to make that data collection even stronger.
Any questions from the board or comments? Thank you, Dr. Essick. Mr. Chair, with no comments, that would be the final report, and we'll be asking tomorrow if it will be approved. Hello?
Thank you, Mr. Keenan.
Hello? Okay. Thank you.
Now turn to Ms. White, Chair of the Special Committee on School Turnaround and Education Innovation in Charter Schools. Ms. White.
Good afternoon, everyone. Special welcome to Superintendent Catherine Hewitt and new Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. I'm Amy White, and I have the privilege of working with the esteemed James Ford on the School Turnaround Committee. And today we're going to have a presentation about our needs assessments that are conducted in schools as they begin the turnaround process. So I think I have Cynthia Martin, Dr. Cynthia Martin, who's going to start us off, and then she is going to turn it over to my computer's being slow, Susan Silver. So Dr. Martin.
Dr. Martin.
Oh, hello. Sorry, I could not hear.
No worries.
I'm so sorry. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So today we are, first let me say good afternoon to Chairman Davis, Superintendent Truitt, and all state board members and advisors. It is truly a pleasure to be before you again. For the last 3 months, we have been discussing our plan to bring back intensive level services. Diagnostic services is a big part of doing just that. Dr. Susan Silver, who is an expert in the comprehensive needs assessment process, will be assisting today and presenting to you the crown jewel in diagnostic services, the comprehensive needs assessment. And in addition to that, she will share what we have learned from doing the CNA for a number of years and our plans moving forward to better support districts and schools who are struggling. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Silver.
Dr. Silver, if you're talking, you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now, Deanna?
Yes, ma'am. Now we can hear you.
Perfect. All right, well, let me start again. First of all, good afternoon to Chairman Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, and welcome. Lieutenant Governor Robinson, Committee Chair White, and Co-Chair Mr. Ford. And thank you, Dr. Martin, for those kind words. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to highlight what is the flagship of our diagnostic services, which is our comprehensive needs assessment process today. There's a lot going on this afternoon, so I appreciate the opportunity to highlight our work. So I'm going to start by sharing where we're situated at within what we refer to as the funnel of support for our statewide services. We are the gold ring there. We exist between statewide services, which are the services that are provided to all schools in the state, and between strategic reform, which is the opportunity for schools to select a reform model. And philosophically, the idea being that schools would have an opportunity to engage in some level of diagnostic services before making that determination of what reform model they would choose. In the next slide, there's just a definition there of diagnostic services, and I'll give you a chance just to look at that. And while you are, I will share that, why do we do needs assessments? It's certainly recommended in research, and the Elementary and Secondary Education Department within the Department of Education states that ESSA requires schools identified for comprehensive support and improvement to engage in a comprehensive needs assessment. And it goes on to identify as a strategy to support successful needs assessments that SEAs fund and facilitate an on-site quality review process that provides robust qualitative data and expert third-party insights on a school's strengths, challenges, and priorities for school improvement. And that is exactly what our process lays out to do and is designed to do. So when that came up in ESSA for CSI schools, North Carolina was already ahead of the curve because we had established our comprehensive needs assessment process in 2008. So some key words you see there on that slide are evidence-based. We have a framework. We are looking for impact of practices on student learning and trying to help schools diagnose strengths and weaknesses in order to support improved outcomes. So in trying to give an overview of what the comprehensive needs assessment is before we get into the details of how it's actually carried out, some key things we wanted to share with the board is in the red box, we wanted a consistent approach and a consistent framework for the assessments of schools and districts. Schools engage in lots of self-assessments. And one thing that's important if you're going to be sharing feedback is for it to be a consistent framework. So that's what our comprehensive needs assessment process allows us to do. The other piece of our process that's important is that it's a third-party external review. So again, that separation between a self-assessment versus third-party, which is what ESSA recommends. Very important in the green box. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback there. Is that this is not a punitive process. It is designed to support improvement, which you see there on the bottom. And we do strive for it to be evidence-based and objective so that we're not going in to just one view of the school based on data, but we're objective and open to what we find. So the framework that we use for the needs assessment is our rubric, our comprehensive needs assessment rubric, and we have the dimensions that you see listed there. And what we find is that if you want to do a comprehensive review of a school, it's important to look at all these pieces because they certainly interplay together if you're trying to improve a school. So we have A1, which is teaching and learning, which includes high expectations and curriculum alignment. We have support for students, which includes data analysis and also support services provided to teachers. Leadership capacity, which includes your mission vision, strategic planning, instructional monitoring, and also looking at ways that teachers are engaged as leaders. Professional capacity, which looks at how we build the capacity of our teachers and how teachers engage collaboratively. Planning and operational effectiveness, which does look very high level at how allotted funds are used to support improvement in student learning, and also how technology are used, how facilities are used, and how safe a school is for students. And then we have family and community engagement, understanding, again, that all these pieces are interconnected in terms of providing the best educational outcomes for students. In the little box on the lower right-hand side, you see ratings. Schools do receive a rating for each one of these dimensions, and it could be one of these four, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we get to those in a moment. But they receive that rating and then a write-up that explains the evidences that we saw to support that rating. And the comprehensive needs assessment is designed to determine impact. What is the impact of whatever a school is doing? The thing that we know about our schools is that a lot is being tried to support our students and that everyone is working very hard and that we're employing lots of initiatives. We want to go there to get to the effectiveness of it and to talk to the stakeholders, the people who are there every day, to determine what the impact is of whatever we are doing in terms of student outcomes. And we come to those conclusions by triangulating the evidence that we found. I've talked about things being evidence-based and that's why we visit the school. So the simple way I explain it to schools is that we're looking to see, is it happening? Do we see or hear it happening 3 or more times or 3 or more places? And you just see the examples there of how we come to a quality judgment or quality rating. There's certainly quantitative data, which is our state level data that we have, benchmark data districts might have, SAT, ACT data, but then we have that qualitative data. So when we're talking again to the people who are there every day and asking them how effective things are, how things work, how it actually looks when you're there on the ground. And then certainly observational data when we're able to be in schools, to go into classrooms, see how teachers and students are interacting, see how staff are interacting and being collaborative, and being able to look at those student work samples. So all that comes together, and then we triangulate the feedback that we eventually share with schools. So we look at that evidence using our professional judgment, and I'll talk a little bit more about the process and what I mean by this, but we examine the evidence, and then that leads to the rating and the feedback. So it's not me sitting in my office looking at their data and coming to some conclusions based on that. It's pairing the trends in the data with what we see on the ground in the school. And with that, we come up with informed judgments. An important piece of this process to remember is that it's not an audit. So it's not a matter of the school has these 3 things in place, so therefore they get this rating or they get this feedback. It's really about looking at what's happening and determining the effectiveness of that. Now, this is our most dense slide, so I have a lot to go through here. There are 3 stages of the comprehensive needs assessment process, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one that'll help you understand some of the previous things that I shared. So the first one is preparation, and that begins with reviewer training and development. So I currently have on my team 5 instructional review coaches. They lead the visits, but we take out 4 team members total. So that means that 3 other people from throughout the agency, from different areas, engage with us on our comprehensive needs assessment process. And that's been a really great thing in the agency to encourage collaboration an understanding of the work, and to give everybody an opportunity to see what's happening on the ground in our schools. So we have those 3 people who join us who may be from any area. They may be from CNI or EC, depending on the needs of the school. And the first thing they do is go through a 4-day training. We don't take anybody out who has not been trained in our process, and we try to continue that development. The next piece happens at the school level, which is the principal orientation. So before any school engages in a comprehensive needs assessment, myself or a designee, but it's typically me, we meet with the principal for about 90 minutes and do an orientation with them so that they understand the process and so that they can collaborate in ways in terms of setting up things that are going to happen during the visit. And then the final piece is the school engages in a self-evaluation, which we take a look at, and we review their data. So any data that DPI collects, we take a look at it and we're looking for trends prior to going into the school. The second phase is the site visit. So they're not quite yet. So the schedule is developed with the superintendent or principal. We also do district assessments in addition to schools. So they have an opportunity to set up their focus groups so they determine who we're going to talk to. And the thing I always tell principals is who is important to helping us understand your school. If that person is important to helping us understand the impact of what you're doing here in your school, then set up a time for us to meet with them. And so they have an opportunity to do that. The visit includes always a meeting with the principal. We start with them, have a 90-minute meeting with them, and then more time the next day. We do a teacher focus group, a student focus group, and a parent focus group, and then we do lesson observations. And there are other meetings scheduled with people as deemed by the principal or superintendent. So for example, counselor, obviously, when you're looking at student support services, schools have different positions that they have titles for, so they have an opportunity to schedule those. And then the final piece of the site visit is the summary feedback meeting. So this is where the team shares with school leadership and whomever they determine appropriate to include in that meeting a bulleted list of things the school does well and areas for improvement. We can give up to 10 things the school does well and no more than 6 areas for improvement. And we share that with the school principal. And later on, one of my colleagues is going to share some of the trends we've seen in the summary feedback in terms of how they align to the dimensions. So before we leave the site, the principal already has some feedback in hand. Then the third phase is the final report. So with those ratings, schools do receive a written up show of the evidence, for lack of a better term, to support whatever feedback we've given the school and the rating. And that's drafted by the instructional review coach who's on my team. Then it goes through a robust quality assurance process. And then the last step is that we send it to the principal for a fact check. So the principal or superintendent, if it's the district report, sees the report first, and they get to provide us feedback, share any corrections that may be needed, and then once we hear from them, the report is finalized, and in the case of a school, is sent to the principal and the superintendent. In your support documents, along with this PowerPoint, I included our notes of guidance. It is a huge document. If you have time this weekend, give a crack at it. But it's very detailed, and it details every step of the comprehensive needs assessment process for schools and for districts. It includes any templates we use. It includes the process. If someone doesn't agree, what schools or districts would do. And that is what we give every principal and every superintendent before we engage in the process, because we want them to have a clear understanding of the process and not feel like there are any gotchas when we come in. I've also included a link to a Canvas course that we created. And our reason for creating this was because upon reflection, we realized we spent a lot of time with the principal before the visit, during the visit, and then the principal gets the report afterwards. But sometimes that didn't trickle down to the teachers. So we created a Canvas course to explain the process to teachers so that principals could send that to their staff prior to our coming in if they so choose. So this slide just shows you over the years the types of schools that we have served and the total number of comprehensive needs assessment visits that have been conducted. And then this slide shows you by year. So we started this process in the spring of 2008. Shows you how many per year. And you'll notice the numbers ebb and flow. A lot of that has to do with the identification process. So, for example, currently in the last 2 years, we've been serving our CSI schools. There have been years when that was our race to the top list. And probably when you see the smallest number, that's probably when I was down to 2 people on my team. So those numbers ebb and flow based on our capacity and based on how senior leadership determines which schools are receiving support. At this time, we're going to share some summary feedback trends. So I mentioned earlier that we give the schools a list of things they do well and areas for improvement. And typically, well, not typically, always, those bullets fall into one of the 6 dimensions that we have. So teaching and learning, leadership capacity, it will fall in one of those areas. So Ken Babineau, my colleague, is going to unmute, and he's going to share what the trends were and how we broke it out. That was part of our work this summer, was to take a look back at all of our reports and look at trends and try to see what we could pull out from that. So Ken, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, good afternoon. Can y'all hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, great. I want to thank each of you for the opportunity to share this data with you. As Susan said, we leave the summary feedback bullets with the schools when we leave. And what we've done as a team is we've gone in and compiled the data to determine what is going on in schools as a trend. So the summary feedback trend data is provided in the PowerPoint in pie chart, and it comes from 2 time periods. You're going to notice that there's 2010 to 2017 and 2018 to 2020 data. These time periods represent data collected prior to and through Race to the Top grant and post Race to the Top grant. The data presented also represents the percentage of all summary bullets that align to one of the 6 dimensions of the rubric. And if you look at the bottom of the pie chart, you're going to see the 6 dimensions listed. It should be noted, though, that trends established for middle and high schools represent a significantly smaller sample size due to the fact that fewer CNAs are conducted in schools of these levels. Most of our CNAs occur at the elementary level. When we examine the summary draft bullets from the 2 time periods, we note that summary draft bullets address Dimension A, Part 1, Teaching and Learning, and Dimension A, Part 2, Support for Student Achievement, along with Dimension B, Leadership Capacity, most often out of the 6 dimensions addressed in the CNA rubric, as the review team frequently sees these areas as the main priorities that significantly impact school and student growth. However, this does not mean that the other 3 dimensions, which are Dimension C, Professional Capacity, Dimension D, Planning and Operational Effectiveness, and Dimension E, Families and Communities, are not equally as important. While fewer summary draft bullets may be written for these dimensions, areas that the school does well and needs to improve upon for these dimensions are addressed in the final report, as each dimension significantly impacts the others. Additionally, it's important to note that summary draft bullets can overlap dimensions. For example, a summary draft bullet may address improving the quality of teaching and learning through the development of teachers' data analysis skills. One person may see this summary draft bullet aligning with Dimension A1, while another may see it aligning with Dimension A2. So once again, you're going to see several pie charts in this presentation, and each one represents either what the school does well, what the school needs to improve upon, and it's broken down by elementary, middle, and high school data. Thank you.
Okay, so Kim provided you with an overview, and we'll let you look at those at your leisure. Deanna, if we could go to slide 21, the overall trends. So those trends in the pie chart speak specifically to how they align to the dimensions from the CNA rubric. And then we took a higher level look to note what has changed or what trends have we seen from 2008 to 2020. And so that's what I'd like to share with you now. So these are overall high level trends, and we broke it down as a plus delta. So what improvements have we seen, things that schools and districts are doing well, and then what areas for improvement do we continue to see over this span of time. So one of the trends that's a positive, we definitely see increased data collection. Districts and schools have access to data, and it's not just about the access, it's also about the use, which leads to the second overall positive, which is increased collaboration, because they're looking at that data in collaboration with one another. When I first started this job, I've been with this process since the beginning in 2008. There were times when schools did not have a PLC process or did not have some other type of collaborative process. That is standard across schools now. A process-driven approach to student support. We see that schools are engaging and using MTSS as a framework to identify support for students. That is pretty consistently seen in our schools now. That's a trend. We see a process-driven approach to school improvement. That was not common in 2008, and NC STAR has definitely helped to strengthen that. We see schools using NC STAR as a basis for their school improvement conversations. We see them using it to document what they're doing, which helps inform next steps and opportunity to reflect. So that definitely has become more consistent over the years. And last, we see a systematic approach to instructional monitoring that has definitely strengthened in the area of leadership capacity. Again, starting this process, there were definitely times when observations were not conducted consistently, or there wasn't the full range of the process, which included the feedback and the support, but that is definitely in place. Now, some of these still have areas that can be improved, is what we call in our reports, the school is doing this, however, this could be strengthened. So as the bullet showed, that the major summary bullet or area from the rubric that is most often addressed is teaching and learning, A1. And that shows up in our trends. Areas for improvement still include increasing rigor and alignment to standards, making sure that interventions and support are targeted to students. So one of the most often things we hear in our schools is that they have the upside down triangle, indicating that core instruction is not as strong as it needs to be, which goes back to alignment to standards typically and engagement of students. Change of instructional practices following support and professional development. So we are getting the instructional monitoring and the feedback, but the support to ensure that that follows through to change is where we continue to see the struggle. The data-driven instruction. So we have more data, teachers are talking about it more, and then that actually transforming into changing practices day to day is still an area that we're continuing to grow in. And then the continuous cycle of improvement. So NC STAR has certainly strengthened those conversations. Schools have more of a clear focus. The piece now that we most often have schools identify as an area for improvement is the continuous monitoring of it. So taking a look at how effective things are and then changing them, or taking a look at things and determining that this is not impacting our students' impact in a significant way, so we need to make a change. So those are the overall trends that we noted from 2008 to now. So now I'll transition, now that you have an overview of the process, some trends to follow-up support. So what happens after a school gets a needs assessment? So several years into this, we reflected and found that our reports were not as impactful as we wanted them to be, and we thought, how can we help schools use this for the purpose it was designed for, which is for school improvement? So we designed a professional development that we do with school improvement teams. So once they have their report, a member of the instruction review coach team goes out and does a 2-day training with the school improvement team where they unpack their report. So that begins with first helping them understand the process. So how do we even arrive at these conclusions that are in the report? And then we take them through pulling out, you'll see there on their chart paper there, evidence impact. So what evidence did the team find? what impact is the school having. Then we take them through a root cause analysis. And finally, we have them at one of the areas for improvement that they want to address, and we begin them on a path to using a common framework for coming up with a plan to address those. And then we connect that with NC STAR. So they don't have two competing plans, but we connect it back to NC STAR. And we try to help them get their lens of looking for impact and developing a common language using the rubric. One of the issues that we find is that sometimes people are using different language when they're talking about school improvement. So we unite around the rubric, which we then connect to NC STAR. And we also have a crosswalk that we connect to other assessments that the agency uses so that schools can see how all of this is interconnected. And this year, because of coronavirus, we developed an online support, which we call our Bridge Virtual Support Training, so that we could touch base with schools and help them to start using their data, and includes many of the same pieces, our root cause analysis and our model for helping them come up with next steps. And then finally, next steps for us, we're always thinking about ways to provide increased follow-up support. When we reflect on that, that's definitely the area where we want to help schools to be able to use this data since they have been through the process. We are doing that in one way. We are hiring an instructional review coach diagnostic liaison position. So this person is going to help us make connections with our regional support teams to figure out how to support schools. They are also going to track back to the schools to help them with that evaluation piece. So this is our area for improvement. How can we support you in bringing to fruition what you noticed as your next steps during the unpacking? We are also adding early learning indicators to our CNA rubric. That was part of, back in the spring, House Bill 1050. We are working with our early learning folks now to get those completed. This time, our focus right now is providing services to our low-performing districts. So we're always trying to determine, because we have limited capacity, who to provide services to. And that entails conducting an assessment of all of our schools and then culminating with a district review. And finally, we are part of providing intensive intervention through our CARES Act 10% funding. So we are noted when regional case managers begin engaging with districts about their participation as part of the memorandum of agreement. Part of that is the opportunity for districts and schools to engage in a comprehensive needs assessment to further determine needs and to help support schools as they continue to try to make progress using that CARES Act funding. So at this time, I will turn it back over to Ms. White to facilitate any questions from the board.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Dr. Silver, for the excellent presentation. I'm still here. We're just having a few technical difficulties. I hope folks can hear me. So if you didn't gather by the presentation, there is, since 2008 and Race to the Top, there's been significant fine-tuning of this evidence-based framework for evaluating our schools. And
I'm sorry, but we cannot hear.
let us take just a quick pause to see if we can resolve that.
Can you hear that? Can you hear me?
Very faint.
This is Deanna. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Faintly, we can.
So this is Mrs. White, and I was just suggesting that this is a strong indication of an evidence-based framework that's been fine-tuned over the years that allows key turnaround leaders to evaluate a school in its current operational status and help the site leaders at those schools make an assessment of the decisions that they need to make in order to develop a systemic approach for change at the school level. And so we had a terrific conversation about this in our pre-board call about why would a school wait to do a CNA? Why wouldn't they use this tool as a self-evaluation tool to track their own progress? It made us think directly about Dr. Bev Emery's new role as our Leandro leader and our state's lowest performing schools, and why this wouldn't be a tool that we train superintendents and principals to use no matter where they're serving. Tremendous indication and a lot of work that's been done. Do any other board members or colleagues or anyone on the call have a question about how this tool is being used to transform turnaround efforts in our state?
Ms. White, this is Olivia.
Yes, Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I'm having difficulty going in and out. Connectivity is not good today for me. But anyway, let me ask my question, unless perhaps it's already been asked. To Dr. Silver, I noticed that there was a point in the PowerPoint frame regarding like phase 1 of the process. The school conducts a self-evaluation or a self-analysis assessment. Would you accept, let's say, self-studies that have been completed for other purposes? I'm thinking of like the SACS process.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Oxendine, and we have thought, so right now the self-assessment aligns to the CNA rubric, and we had some conversation about was there a way to use other self-assessments the schools had done so that they essentially didn't have to do it again. And the feedback we received was that this helped principals prepare for the visit, because what it does is it takes them through the process of thinking about the questions that they know we're going to ask that align to those areas. So based on that feedback, we chose to keep it. But I encourage schools, I say, so if you've done your needs assessment for NC STAR, we provide them with our crosswalk tool to show them where they align so that they can pull some of the data from that so that they're not recreating things specifically for us. But the feedback we receive from principals is that it helps them in thinking through what we're going to ask. And it's also their roadmap to help set up the visit, because we look at the needs assessment and then think about who we're going to talk to in addition to whoever the principal provides.
Okay, very good. And if I could just do a brief follow-up to that.
Mm-hmm.
The other question pertains to a frame in the PowerPoint that shows the number of schools or school districts, I'm not sure, with which you spend time. From one year to the next, do you have recurring schools? Would you have duplicated schools in that count?
And we do have this data broken out and could share that later. You will find schools that duplicate, but not year to year. We have a informal policy within our unit, which is that if a school has received a CNA within the last 2 to 3 years, we consider that to still be valid data. So a lot of times when we're identifying schools, we'll say, well, have they had one within the last 3 years? And if they have, we would offer them follow-up support rather than going in again, because we want to provide the resource to as many schools that haven't engaged in the process as possible. But sometimes based on the way things are written, for example, in ESSA, this school has to have one. Sometimes there are some duplicates. And we have had districts request that we come in and do another one. And if we are able, in terms of capacity and time, we try to honor that.
Right. Thank you for the answer. I would be interested at some point in seeing a data sheet that shows recurring, let's say every 3 years, let's say from 2010, maybe not the next year because of the policy you have in place for giving a break, but maybe if their schools recur in, let's say 12, 13. That's just an example.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine.
Any other questions? Chair Davis.
Ms. White, can you hear me? Can my colleagues hear me?
Better.
I can hear you.
So these assessments, this is really good work, and assessing is the first step towards improvement. My question is, what evidence do we have that these CNAs are actually resulting in positive outcomes for our students in these schools?
Mhm. So I think if you think about the slide from 2008 to 2012, where we highlight, here are the changes that we've seen over years. That's because of an intentional process to link this initial CNA, and we're diagnostic, so admittedly we don't typically, outside of our unpacking, we're not typically able to get into the weeds of that real heavy-duty support, which is part of why we want to take our next steps of that. But if you notice those trends, that's an intentional effort to align our needs assessment with NC STAR, which is the school improvement team, and then also connecting that with also the MTSS indicators that they have, so schools see as a comprehensive approach. So I believe that those changes can be contributed to a more systematic process that's occurring across the agency that includes this process as well. And what we're looking forward to with our diagnostic liaison position is being able to have that opportunity to have a position that can circle back and evaluate, well, what's the impact of this and what changes are we seeing in those areas for improvement?
May I follow up?
Sure.
So forgive me if you answered this, but so what evidence do we have that schools and districts are actually applying what's in the CNAs?
Right. So again, as discussed often with DPR, our role is certainly to provide support and recommendations and to support a district or school in carrying those things out. A big part of that, we try to go in with support as opposed to a hammer, happens with the unpacking to really get the schools to trust the process and then to take the next step. So we help them in that initial piece with the unpacking of designing their next steps. And the goal of that is to build capacity. So our goal is to model, here's a process for developing your next steps, and then to evaluate them so to help them start thinking about impact. Well, what impact is this having in the same way that we do to build their capacity? Because the honest answer is with 5 people, we don't have the capacity to go back to ensure that schools are carrying out or addressing the areas for improvement. And our process is not designed to give a specific recommendation to a school of you must do this. It's to identify, here's an area, here's a root cause of it. How can we help you to identify what resources you have to address it?
Ms. White, this is Bev Emery. May I make a comment?
Yes, Dr. Emery, thank you.
I want to thank you all and just say, Chair Davis, you have struck at the heart of school improvement here, and the work that this diagnostic team is doing is one of the best things we have going on. And we get requests from schools and districts that are not identified in any way, either CSI, TSI, or low performing. But the work happens once this is done, and implementation and fidelity of implementation is where we hope to build out. And of course, again, grateful for the 10% CARES Act, because it is building a model that wraps this service around with some coaching and follow-up. Also want to be sure the board is aware that we are in year 2 of the regional case managers actually reviewing all of those NC STAR plans and providing feedback to the schools and districts. And because of the collaboration within district and regional support, they're also using these comprehensive needs assessments as sort of a parallel guide as they look at those plans. So again, we're all talking about how do we take diagnostics, implement them, align them, and then come back and reevaluate effectiveness. And the gift of the CARES Act money is going to allow us to build this model out and hopefully come back in 2 years and say that this connection, this sort of circular connection of what you've identified here does get us a result, and even more specific to which strategies yielded greater result than others.
Thank you, Dr. Emery and Dr. Martin. I want to thank both of you and your team for this. This work is only going to become more important. If I've got my numbers right, pre-pandemic, we were over 480 schools that need services. That number is going to jump. And the assessment services you're providing now are going to be even more important. And we're going to need to send you more resources to do more assessment work over more schools, as well as the follow-up services forward. So I think that's an opportunity to identify for use, hopefully, of some of the federal funds that are headed our way, as well as continuing state commitment to turn around schools, because we've got an even taller mountain to climb. So thank you for what you're already doing.
Yes, sir. This is Mrs. White again. I'll follow with that because former board member Tricia Willoughby, if anything, trained me well, and her advocacy for pre-K and her consistent advocacy reminds me to be an advocate for the continuation of funding for the positions that were funded through the CARES Act for district and regional support. We'll need to find a way to continue to provide that support through additional personnel. The CNA is a diagnostic tool, just like going to the doctor. Once you figure out what the problem is, then you have to have a treatment plan. And so carrying forward that as we have schools that exemplify common areas of need, building cohorts for training will help us use our dollars wisely, but we must have the personnel to provide that training. So here's me beating the horse for the first time and the second and the third, that once the CARES money goes away, we're going to have to find a need to the money to continue to provide those positions. Any other comments?
Mrs. White?
Yes, Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to thank everyone. Sorry, we're having some more problems here. In looking at the what's next slide, and given the chair's comments and your comments, Mrs. White, now may not be the time, but I'm very interested in learning more about what providing services means. What does increased follow-up support mean? Because that is going to set the table for what the chair described as the most important work we're going to be doing.
Thank you for that comment and agreed. There's much work left to be done, and the what next is the most important part of the discussion of moving our schools out of low performing to consistently high performing. Not seeing any other comments, that will conclude the work today on the special committee on school turnaround. With the chair's permission, would it be okay for us to move right into the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. So we're going to begin our discussion today on the Education, Innovation, and Charter School report. First, recognizing that I share the responsibility of leading this committee with Jill Kamnitz. And we have a report today as required by state statute to the JELOC. This report is due on January the 15th, and today it's a report on the implementation and progress of the North Carolina Innovative School District. And I believe that Dr. Ellerby and potentially David Stegall are here to give us that report.
Dr. Ellerby.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, Lieutenant Governor Robertson, and members of the State Board of Education. I am Dr. James Ellaby, the Innovative School District Superintendent. I am here to give an update on the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee, the JLEOC, annual report about the implementation and the progress of the North Carolina School District, known as the ISD, for your approval on today. Our team loves to look at the strategic plan that we have for our state and look at the vision and mission and goals to ensure that all our work aligns to the strategic plan. As you see in our mission, we are about improving student achievement, but we use an equity and an opportunity lens in order to make sure that we're supporting our low performing schools. In the JLEOC report, you can expect to find some historical information about the ISD, the findings from the Friday Institute evaluation, along with the perceptual data, such as interviews and surveys that the Friday Institute conducted, as well as school performance data and accountability results, and then recommendations. I'd also like to highlight the caution that the findings are only on one school and not the ISD as a division. To review real quickly, Session Law 2019-248, otherwise known as Senate Bill 522, our lowest performing schools are identified through the ISD to be on a qualifying list. They're the bottom 5%, and they're Title I schools to exclude alternative schools, cooperative innovative high schools, as well as schools in their first or second year or newcomer schools. The selection from 2021 to 2022 was supposed to be the lowest performing school according to their school performance score. According to Senate Bill 522, our new process from 2023 to 2024 will start with year one as the qualifying list. Each year there is the qualifying list based upon the criteria that I shared in the previous slide. Year two is the watch the year list, and year three is the warning list, and then year four is the selection. A local board of education, along with a recommendation from the ISD superintendent, also can volunteer to have a school selected for the ISD. The type of support definitely comes from the board, and that support has been tremendous, as well as the monitoring and assistance from our team of the ISD with funding, strategies, and partners for comprehensive support and improvement efforts. According to the 2019 to 2020 data, there were 69 schools on the qualifying list. 42 of those schools were rural, and 27 of those schools were urban. Just gives a quick snapshot of the timeline. And of course, in March, schools were closed due to COVID-19. Based on the school selection process, in 2019, Southside Ashpole Elementary began in the ISD. In 2018, no school was selected. In 2019, no schools were selected due to Senate Bill 522 changes. And 2020, no school is selected due to COVID-19. The Friday Institute had 4 buckets or indicators in order to measure the progress. Again, I'd like to remind you, according to the researchers, it is just based on one school and not the ISD, but those indicators are academic growth and achievement, learning conditions and student behavior, school community engagement, as well as school culture. According to the Friday Institute report, there was no academic data or quantitative data to measure progress in academic growth and achievement. In the learning conditions and student behavior, it was noted that the staff believed that the student discipline improved tremendously, and also that students agreed that they enjoyed school, and parents agreed that school academic success for school was absolutely essential. Under school community engagement, according to the Friday Institute report, parents felt more comfortable talking to the administrators and teachers based on information from the previous year, and that parents agreed that the school had a clear information about student learning, and that parents felt welcome and the volunteerism actually improved. Under school culture, the teachers felt the environment at the school is family oriented, that students are more respectful and enjoyed school more, and that the parents believed that the children were safe at the school, and there were observable changes in the school administration, such as organization, openness, visibility, and communication. These were the recommendations that were given by the Friday Institute, is to ensure that all supplementary and primary curriculum resources were aligned to the state standards. Also, that there was a separation in the progress measurement of the legacy and the new ISD students to create a robust theory of change, as well as to address challenges of managing a district remotely and to minimize tensions between leaderships. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Ellerby, for the review and summary and the information provided by the most recent evaluation. I believe Dr. Tripp Stallings was involved in gathering that information for us. Board members, questions that you have for Dr. Ellerby on this report, which will be given to our friends at the JELOC?
And Ms. White, I'm sorry, but I'm having a hard time. I can hear you, but barely.
Any questions from colleagues about Dr. Ellerby's report?
Yes, Ms. White, Olivia has a couple of
Yes,
questions.
Dr. Oxendine.
Oh, yes, and I can hear you quite well.
Okay, I can hear you too. Thank you.
I'll start singing.
I can see you closer. I can see you up close and personal with the mic. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Ellerby. If you would go back, or someone who's navigating PowerPoint, I would go back to the recommendation frame, please.
Yes.
Give me, are you working on any of these recommendations?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Any of them in process? Could you talk about the status of any one that you choose?
Yes. And Deanna, if you don't mind going back to the recommendation slide, please. This is the first one, the primary and the supplementary curriculum resources. We had CKLA and as well as Eureka Math that was being used by the operator, and teachers reported that they did not find that it was aligned to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So what we have done is work with UPD to make sure that all of these things are aligned.
Okay.
As far as the measuring the progress of the legacy, and the new ISD students, we are separating the data to identify information under these two groups. The robust theory of change, we are currently in the process of that as we work with the board to identify an ISO or innovative school operator, as well as to address the challenges in managing the district remotely. We are working to be more visible and making sure that we're in contact with those schools, and that has been going well as well. And of course, we're going to always look to be collaborative with any partners that we have in the leadership level.
It would be interesting, Dr. Ellerby, in the future, if you could keep us updated on the status of the progress that you're making with respect to addressing the recommendations. I'm particularly interested in one, and the theory of change.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. White.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Ellerby.
Thank you.
Successful presentation. To our friends at the General Assembly, let's move to EICS 2. This is Wake Prep's request to have a second year delay. Wake Prep Academy is a charter school that was approved by the state board last year. They had their first year of delay due to site issues and have asked for a second year of delay as well. Dave Machado is here to answer any questions. Board members, you've had a chance to look at this last month as a discussion item. Does anyone have further questions about this request? I'm not hearing any. Let's move to EICS 3. This is a revocation recommendation for Essie Mae Kaiser Fox Charter School. Dave Machado is on the call. I believe Alexis Schaus is also available for questions, but the Charter School Advisory Board voted unanimously to begin the revocation proceedings for Essie Mae Kaiser Fox. They're asking us to approve that request. Essie Mae did not submit a financial audit for over a year of time. They had a student performance score of an F, and I'll let Mr. Machado answer any further questions that you might have about this particular school.
Thank you, Ms. White, and Chairman Alex Quigley is also on the line to answer any questions that you might have. I'd just like to add that this is a K-6 charter school in Rowan County with approximately 99 students. I do want to tell the State Board of Ed that we did finally receive an audit for the 2019 year in late December of 2020, which the audit was still over a year old. And according to General Statute 115C 218.95, a reason for revocation or termination is a failure to submit a timely audit. And Chairman Quigley and Ms. Schaus are on the line to answer any questions that the board might have.
Questions from board members? Okay, Mr. Machado, just for just a quick reminder for my colleagues and for anyone listening, what happens when the board decides to begin a closure process? Can you just sort of walk us through what happens if a decision is made to close the school, say at the end of the school year? What would happen?
Okay, once your decision is made, which presumably might be tomorrow, we will send a letter to the school stating the fact that you did make that vote. There is an appeal process that they can go through. We have a closure procedure, and we have 2 staff members on my team that are part of what we call the closure team, and they will meet with the school and go over the entire process of how to close the school. We work very closely with the FBS division when it comes to financial assets, any kind of assets that will have to be returned to the local LEA. We work with the school to help assist the school in getting their students into other schools. And there is a very detailed process that we will meet with the school and discuss the whole procedure. It's very organized and very detailed. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Machado. Hearing no other questions, my recommendation tomorrow is going to be to accept the recommendation from the Charter School Advisory Board that we revoke SMA Charter Kaiser Fox's charter due to their failure to submit an audit in both 2019 and 2020. That'll take us to EICS 4, which is the Advisory Council appointments for the North Carolina Virtual Public School. And here to just review those, again, you saw those last month, but does anyone have any questions about those recommendations? I have Dr. Liz Colbert and Dr. Mia Murphy available for questions if anyone has any. Two stellar candidates being recommended. Okay, I'm not hearing any questions on that. Let's move to EICS 5. This is the 2020 Accelerated Charter School Application Recommendations coming out of the Charter School Advisory Board. Board members, last month we had a chance to discuss these applications at length and ask questions. Before you on the document page, you'll see Faith Academy, Old Mainstream Academy, and the School of the Arts for Boys Academy. Today, we are going to, I'm going to recommend that we move forward with a recommendation for Faith Academy and Old Mainstream, but Mr. Chair, due to a question about from our legal team about the School of Arts for Boys in Academy in Chatham County, we want to just make sure that we're dotting every I and crossing every T before we recommend with fidelity that we accept that recommendation. So I'm going to ask that we pull the School of the Arts for Boys Academy from our recommendation today, just to give our legal team a little bit of extra time to review. No need for pause on their part. We just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. Does anyone have a question about Faith Academy or Old Mainstream Academy? Vice Chair Duncan.
In part, from the presentation about applications, I went back and looked at the statutes. And 115C218A was not part of that presentation. That, of course, is where it sets out the purpose of charter schools. And the operative language there says that about the purpose is that to provide opportunities for teachers, parents, pupils, and community members to establish and maintain schools that operate independently of existing schools as a method to accomplish all of the following. There's 6 things listed, which are improved student learning, increased learning opportunities, including for students at risk and academically gifted, especially encouraging different teaching methods, encouraging new professional opportunities, providing parents and students with expanded choice, and holding the schools established accountable. I have heard several times that all you really need is to have one of those 6, which is in 115C218.5, I think is what's being referred to there. And that says the state board may grant final approval on an application if it finds the following. And subsection 3 says granting the application would achieve one or more of the purposes set out in GS 215C218.
So in that instance, in any instance, for any school 6, you're going to be required to meet accountability standards. So that would mean anybody could theoretically qualify under the criteria that it's the board may grant. But I find those two statutes, to be perfectly candid, they're in conflict, because one says all is required. That's 115C 218, which is the original authorizing statute for charter schools. That's in conflict with 115C 218.5, which we rely on a lot. That's and I'm not sure I'm comfortable relying on it in the sense that it's a may, it's not a we have to. All that's a prelude to saying is I look back at 115C 218 of the 3 that were before us, and there's one that does have a legal question. That's the one I do think meets all 6 criteria in 115C 218. I think it meets every one of those criteria, and except for the issue that must be reviewed and satisfied, which is an ongoing effort. I do not think either of the other 2 meet all 6 of the criteria, and in some instances, it's clear from the record, just of the CSAB minutes report, that they don't meet all of those criteria. So really, at some point, I'm raising the question that the board has to come to grips with. We have a statutory conflict. How are we going to interpret this ongoing? How do we look at it? That's the larger issue. So given that conflict, and given that I have some reservations about both those other 2, I'd ask for some information about demographics on the faith school. It specifically was requested, and in the CSAB minutes, it's reflected that was requested, and they did not know. They were not able to provide that data to the applicants. And I asked for it. I don't know if Dave or Alex has had a chance to get that information. If they have, I'd be delighted to hear it. But I guess that's my question, what further information we have. My statement or comment is I'm going to have trouble supporting those schools based on just the criteria. And I do think it will do the board well to reach an understanding. If the board has a consensus, I'm going to be fine going along with the consensus. But right now, I think there's a conflict, and we may not all see it the same way. And that's important that we try to get on the same page. Thank you for giving me that time, and I hope you could hear me.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan, for those comments and the attention brought to the fact that there could be a perceived gap in the language surrounding how charter schools meet the criteria as set forth by the state. Are any other questions before us at this time from colleagues on the 1 Faith Academy in Rowan County and 2 Old Mainstream in Robeson County?
Do they have answers to the demographic question?
Mr. Machado, do you have any questions to the demographic questions?
Obviously, being a school that's not open yet, we don't have demographic information. In their application, they say that they will reflect the community, and they have committed to a weighted lottery, a lunch program, and transportation. So we're confident that we'll be able to meet that goal.
Mr. Machado, Faith Academy is in Rowan County, as is S.C. May Kaiser Fox. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is true.
So would there be if should the board vote to revoke the charter for S.C. May, that perhaps some of those students, and I understand that could move over to Faith Academy?
Yes, we actually had the situation in Raleigh when Hope Charter closed on their own, and the Board of Hope Charter and Southeast PAVE Charter, excuse me, their boards had an enrollment articulation agreement where they gave preference to the students at Hope. We will certainly work with both Faith Charter and S.E. May, if that were to be the case, to encourage Faith to give enrollment preference to S.E. May students. Both boards would have to agree on that, and that would be an amendment request that would have to come through our office. But that has happened before, and we would strongly recommend that Faith work on that, if that is what the vote is for tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. Just on a, as a matter of note, Phil Kirk wrote a letter in support of the of Faith Academy in Rowan County, and Representative Graham in Robeson County wrote a letter supporting Old Mainstream. Just wanted to make folks aware of the advocacy there on those two.
Ms. White?
Is that Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful.
I wonder if I might just return quickly to Vice Chair Duncan's comments and add another piece to that, because it seems to me that very frequently we struggle with whether it's just one of the criteria or all of the criteria. We sometimes struggle with finding CSAB's rationale for that. And I'm wondering if going forward, we might ask that they provide that in a more obvious way in terms of when they make a recommendation to us. Could they include that information?
The board can certainly ask for that in the recommendation.
I think that might help us going forward, in addition to addressing the concern that Vice Chair Duncan raised.
Okay, thank you for that comment and that suggestion. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and move forward to the discussion item that we have today. Aristotle Prep Academy is a request to us to partner with an AMO, and here to discuss that request is Mr. Machado.
Thank you, Ms. White. Aristotle Prep Academy is in Mecklenburg County. It opened in 2013. It's currently K-7 with 180 students. They are a C school in Met Growth in 2018 and 19, and that is they had worked really hard to get out of the low performing status. They are choosing Charter One to be their partner, their management company, because they have so much alike. They use core knowledge curriculum, Singapore math, and they also have a service component to their curriculum, which is exactly what Charter One does also. They were a Team CFA affiliate school, and obviously Team CFA is no longer operating in the state, so they sought after some additional help. Aristotle is a Title I school. Every student in the school receives a free and reduced lunch. 79% of their population is African American, 5% is Asian, 10% is 2 or more races, 2% are Pacific Islanders. So you can see it's an extremely diverse demographics. This was voted unanimously by CSAB, and we think that this will be a very good addition to Aristotle.
Question from board members regarding this school's request to partner with a new EMO, Charter One. Okay, thank you very much. We have 2 consent items on this month's agenda. Expedition School is before us requesting permission to implement a weighted lottery through the let's see, Mr. Machado, is this the school that's not going through the NC Access grant? What, fill us in on that?
Yes, that is correct. Expedition is in Hillsborough in Orange County. They're a K-8 school, 360 students. They opened up in 2004. They're an A school, exceeded growth. Their goal for the weighted lottery is to be 25% EDS. They're currently between 2 and 7%, and they are not applying for the NC Access grant, which speaks fairly highly of the school. And I think that I would just like to kind of comment on that this is an example of the increased awareness in the charter school community to increase the diversity in our schools and to lower barriers. And I think that's a direct result from the conversations that the State Board of Ed has had at the State Board table. It is definitely a definite result from the Charter School Advisory Board's rigor in the application process. And I also think it's a result from the NC Access Grant and Fellows Program that it's just more and more emphasis on lowering barriers in our high-quality charter schools for the economically disadvantaged population. So I am very proud of the school for asking for a weighted lottery to increase their diversity on the reason that it's just the right thing to do. And thank you for allowing me to mention that, Ms. White.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. Questions? Excellent. So the last item on consent and on our agenda today for the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee is EICS 8, and this is a request from Sterling Montessori to amend its mission statement. Questions about Sterling Montessori? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Chair, that concludes our committee work for the day.
Thank you, Ms. White. And that concludes today's committee work. We'll have the remaining committee reports during tomorrow's meeting. I want to thank my colleagues, advisors, DPI staff, and others who contributed to today's meeting. I now ask for a motion to go into closed session and note for the audience and online listeners that following our closed session, the January 6, 2021 meeting will adjourn immediately. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I move that we go into closed session to consult with our attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, and to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, or condition of appointment of a public officer or employee, or prospective public officer or employee, and to consider and give instructions concerning a potential or actual claim in the actions entitled Minnick versus State Board of Education and Hoke County Board of Education et al. Versus State of North Carolina.
Motion by Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Ms. White. Any discussion? Hearing none, Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Keenan? Dr. Tipton Rogers? Dr. Tipton Rogers? Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers? Mr. Keenan? Chair Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. Let's be in closed session at 3:15, and I think to organize that, we just need all those who will not participate in closed session to drop from the line. All right, 3:15.